It's Lucy Litch, and this is Tiny House Conversations. It's the Australian-based podcast where I interview experienced tiny houses, tiny builders, and adventurers in the tiny world so you can discover how to create, build, and transition into tiny life. Before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you about a wellness company whose products I've been using for many years, which I'll also have in my tiny house, and you might like to as well. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while and following along, or you know me personally, you'll know that health is super important to me. It's my number one value, and that includes a healthy home environment, especially a healthy tiny home environment. And Block Blue Light are an amazing company who supply specialty downlights, light bulbs, reading lamps, blue blocking glasses, and much more to help reduce your exposure to artificial light from all your devices, regular LED lights, and other unnatural sources of lighting, as well as electromagnetic fields or EMFs, especially at the wrong times of the day or night. Artificial light can impact our sleep and can contribute to other health effects, often unknowingly, which we'll cover in a future episode. And just like anything, the key is what impact this has on our health over the long term. Block Blue Light's products use amber and red lights or lenses, think sunset, candle, moonlight, and fire vibes, which humans naturally would have been exposed to, especially in the evenings in our ancestral past. I especially love my clear crystal blue blocking glasses to wear during the day to work on my computer, as well as their light bulbs and twilight sleep lamps at night, and their twilight red light torches for camping weekends away. And in my tiny home, instead of having regular LED downlights, all my downlights are amber ones from Block Blue Light, which means I don't have to worry about exposure to unnatural blue light. And for someone who has had challenges with sleep for several years, I absolutely notice a difference in sleep when I use my specialty blue blockers, lamps, and lights, which have been shown to support production of your sleep hormone melatonin for healthier sleep patterns. Now, the good news is Block Blue Light are offering you, a listener of the podcast, 10% off your order when you use my unique link and code. Just head over to tinyhouseconversations.com/blue light and use the code THC podcast, that's THC for Tiny House Conversations, to get your discount. I'll also put a link in the show notes for you for easy access. And if you haven't heard my Tiny House conversation with naturopath Amy Skilton all about reducing EMFs in your tiny home or any home, this includes reducing your exposure to blue light. So check out episode number 32, and I'll put a link in the show notes to that as well. And stay tuned for a podcast all about reducing artificial blue light in your tiny home and why it's important for your health. Now, here's the intro for today's show. Hey, it's Lucy, and welcome back to another episode of Tiny House Conversations. Today I'm speaking with Amy and Greg, who are experienced tiny houses based in South-East Queensland. They share their journey on social media as Life Done Simple, which serves as a vessel to share with you their pursuit of a more simplified life, financial empowerment, and a lifetime of great memories, all while living full-time in a 7.2 by 2.4 meter tiny house on wheels. And in this conversation, we talk about what it means to make space for life, not stuff, what tiny house life has done for their family's relationship, some of the main challenges Amy and Greg have experienced during tiny house living, why living in a tiny house is not a sacrifice, some advice for curious tiny house folks with kids wondering, can I actually live this way with kids? And so much more. I really loved this conversation. Amy and Greg were so easy to chat with, and they shared some great insights. I really love what they're creating as well. It's super inspiring with their self-sufficient life. So with that being said, on to this tiny house conversation with Amy and Greg. Amy and Greg, thanks so much for joining me on Tiny House Conversations. It's so great to have you.
Well, thank you so much for having us. We're excited.
Yeah.
For sure. And you guys, so you live in your tiny house with your two kids in South-East Queensland. And I'm curious, are you able to let us know, what was it that made you decide to transition into tiny house living?
Yeah, so we've been living in our tiny house for about 3 years now. And it all kind of started, I think, where a lot of the new tiny house dwellers start, which was living big in a tiny house, seeing all their content and just having that idea. So I saw it fairly early on, probably about 4 years ago, just in passing on YouTube, and then didn't really give, much thought to it. But probably the catalyst for us was the passing of my father. So he unfortunately ended up taking his own life after he was in a situation that left him without a home of his own and no income and no money to support himself. And we were in a situation where we couldn't afford to have dad live with us in our property. We were in a small residential estate, and it probably just wouldn't have worked for us. And there just wasn't many options for work where we were either. So we had sent him over to New Zealand, and unfortunately, yeah, he couldn't get any work, and then landed up taking his life. So I guess with any passing, you always reevaluate life, but this was just different. Sorry, I'm getting emotional, but I was really involved in my work at the time, and I hadn't taken any time off of work to be with dad when he needed me. So the week before he left for New Zealand, I had a few moments with him after work. I dropped him off at the airport on the day that he left. Momentarily, he didn't even get to go sit and enjoy coffee with him. It was just a drop and go situation, and then that was the last time that I saw him. And I think reflecting on that, I felt a lot of guilt in the sense that I put work before my family, and work was just so important to me. All the thought of losing my job and not being able to support myself and our family, it was just such a strong emotion with me back then. And then I think that's when I realized that my priorities weren't aligned with what I really wanted to pursue in life. So I guess we started reevaluating then, looking at our expenses and how much money we were spending just in life in general to do, all these things that we're told is what successful life is. But we really weren't happy. We were quite disconnected as a family, didn't get to do many, adventurous things. I wasn't going to the gym, but I was paying for a membership. And I think that was when tiny houses kind of popped back up and became a potential solution, because our biggest expense was rent for us then. And so the best way to downsize our expenses was to downsize our home. And so my lovely husband Greg was away at Rocky for uni, and I sent him a reel, I think it was, or something, like a short video or something of the tiny house. And I said, I think we should build a tiny house. And he said, okay, let's do it. And so I took that and I ran with it. And I think within 3 months from there, we had already engaged our builders and started downsizing. So it was all, once it happened, we'd had the conversations about our lifestyle. But yeah, the tiny house leap was fairly quick for us.
Thank you for sharing all of that, Amy. And yeah, I guess I just want to acknowledge and say I'm really sorry about your dad. And I can relate on some level. And I know that, with situations that happen like that, and the passing of family, it is always this realigning and reassessing of what is most important, and where do I want to focus my energy, and how do I want to spend my days, and do I want to be more with my family and spend more time with the people that mean most to me, because we just never know what's going to happen in life. So I'm really honored that you shared that, and I know that it would be a very challenging thing to go through. And I guess like a light in that is being able to create this really intentional way of living for yourself and your family and your kids, and transitioning into this tiny way of life. And I'm curious, because I know you said you guys have been doing it for about 3 years, and I've been watching your journey online, and just seeing all the little things that you've put in place and you've created to be more self-sufficient and to be really living a beautiful way. And I'm curious, are you guys are you fully off the grid with what you're doing with power and water and toilets and stuff like that?
It's sort of a half-half situation for us. So we're mostly off grid, but we still have main power coming from the grid, so to speak. We have our own water tank and we have a composting toilet that we use and, like a gas stove. But yeah, we still have electricity that comes from the main grid, so to speak, at this stage. When we looked into the solar power for ours, it wasn't going to benefit us in regards to, because we were looking at the cost effect for us and it wasn't really going to save us that much at this stage.
Yeah. Because our parking spot has power as well, it wasn't something we needed to look at. The outlay up front was quite substantial and it would take us far longer to pay that power back than it is to just pay our quarterly bill. So
yeah, which is dropped anyway because we are in a smaller space significantly.
Yeah, I can imagine it would do that for sure, like a lot less bills than living in a normal home. And are you guys still using for like the toilets? Are you still using the separate villa composting toilet?
Yes, we love it.
Yeah. It's still working out for you guys?
No, we haven't had any troubles with it.
No, I think the only time we've had issues is the urine pipe holds urine in it, like it constantly, and I accidentally, when I was vacuuming, whacked it out the back of the toilet and it went everywhere. It was awful.
Oh dear.
Other than that, it is quite good. So, but otherwise, yeah, we love the toilet.
Yeah, I guess it's to be expected sometimes when you're kind of being involved in all of that stuff that there's going to be at least one or two times that maybe something like that happens. But yeah, and that's good to know that it's working out for you because like one of the most common questions I get asked, and I'm sure you guys do, and the hot topic in the tiny house world is like, what composting toilet, what brand, what type, and how is it working for you guys? So it's really good to know. Because I think a lot of people actually with the separates like often go, I hear more commonly about the separate tiny, but I think the separate villa, am I correct in saying it's a little bit bigger, like it's got a bigger capacity than the separate tiny?
Yes. For us, we only have, I think at one point we pushed it out to 3 weeks before changing the toilet, but we now do it every week.
Yeah. It's more just like a thing that we do every, like taking the rubbish out now.
Yeah. Just because we use fully compostable bags that are made out of cornstarch. So if you leave it for too long, the bag breaks and it just makes it messier to clean up. So that's the only reason we do it so regularly.
Yeah.
But the capacity is quite good, especially with a family.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's awesome. And I think you guys got your home built by Aussie Tiny Houses. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And which model and what size is it?
When we built it was the Coogee 7.2 and then we customized the design.
Mm-hmm.
I actually work for a residential builder, so I have got some experience in the building industry. So ended up customizing it and then they actually added that to their range full time. So it's the TUR 7.2 now. Yeah, it was more, we flipped the design a little bit, like we flipped the bathroom, we added the full bench top, a lot of additional shelving, the addition of the second loft, and we reconfigured the staircase completely. So it's completely different to how they originally had it, mainly because we wanted to be able to put our standard fridge that we had from our previous home in here. And then we also added the microwave into the stairs, but we wanted it to be covered so you couldn't see it when you walked in. And then with the addition of the loft for the children, we also did the IKEA couch down underneath. And so that shifted how big our kitchen and staircase was. So we increased them slightly. And then, of course, the amazing builders had to work out how high each of the steps were going to be. So it was a little bit of fiddly work for them there, but now our couch fits in perfectly. So.
And you can't forget the massive bifold window.
Of course, yes. Everyone's favourite feature.
Oh, yeah.
The bifold window, we added that as well.
Yeah, they went through a lot of trouble to try and find our bifold window for us. So, yeah, it was definitely, especially this time of year in spring, it's amazing having that bifold window.
Yeah, makes the house just so much more livable.
Yeah, I can imagine, and I'd imagine it also like kind of bring the outside in a bit too, and you're able to have this beautiful view of nature and the outdoors. I love that. And do you guys have, I don't know if maybe the bifold windows or something else, but do you have a favorite feature of your home?
I haven't been asked that one before.
No, I think I go more for a room, and I actually love the bathroom most. I don't know why. I think it's just, I feel like I'm in a rainforest when I'm in there and I'm showering. Just the whole energy with the cedar and the plants.
Love it. Love it. What about you, Greg?
I'm not so sure. That one's a tough one for me. Look, I definitely think the bifold is probably my favorite feature, mainly because when it opens up, it's amazing how fresh everything feels. Like, as in, everything can feel nice inside as it is, but like we normally open it up when it's like on the weekend or in the morning or something, and we're working between inside the house and outside the house, or if we're having breakfast or a dinner or something like that. And as soon as we open it up, it's like the whole room feels bigger, and it feels like you can feel the fresh air in it. Everything just feels, yeah, they're fresh. So I think, yeah, that's probably my favorite.
Oh, I love it. And I'm curious as well, because I know that you guys have got your two little kids, and how are they finding tiny house living, and maybe what has it done for your family and your family's relationship? I'm wondering, like, has it brought you closer together? I mean, you're literally closer together in a smaller space, but just, yeah, anything that you feel okay to share?
Yeah, that's actually probably quite a long list. It definitely has brought us a lot closer. I think when we first moved into the tiny, we were unsure about how they were going to
How they're going to react.
Yeah, like I think we thought that it might end up being a thing that we were going to have to end up maybe trying to figure something else out if it fell apart. But they dove straight into it, and I think the whole part that we take on at the moment, that is with us being close, is like they still get their personal time. Like, they still get time to themselves where, they're away from us, and they, like, what most teenagers and pre-teenagers do. But at the same time, like, we can still communicate with them, and it's not like we're the complete strangers because of their personal time. Like, we can be in separate rooms, but in the same room at the same time, if that makes sense.
The approach that we took when we went tiny is it was a change of lifestyle. So it was to be able to travel and to adventure more, which I think that is how the kids have approached it. It's all just a big adventure. I know when we first took them to see the house up at the builders, they were like, "This is tiny." And I think they started freaking out just a little bit. And then when we finally moved the house onto the block and they got to see it all finished, they're like, "Okay, it's not that bad." But with them, it's also really a cool difference for them at school. Like, their friends think that they're cool because they live in a tiny house, and it's on trend at the moment, I guess. But it's been really good because I think the house has transitioned quite nicely from obviously young kids to now we've got a teenager and a preteen. And because it's our own space, we've been able to be very flexible. So initially it was just like a bedroom with some toys and their clothes up in the loft, but now it's like a little media station with their colored LED lights and their gaming systems and stuff. So I think they've got a lot more freedom in that sense because we weren't able to do those kind of things when we did have a rental. So that's been really good. They've adjusted quite well.
And I mean, like, we've been able to teach them a lot more out here too, compared to like when we were living in a bit more residential as well. Like, obviously we're a bit rural, and we've got the animals that we have and everything like that. But like we get them to help out with everything around the yard, obviously. So
yeah, all the gardening and stuff.
Yeah, they're in the garden. They help with the chickens and the ducks and things like that to make sure that they're, being looked after. Whereas like in residential, it was just, the chores that they have was very different. So, they're outside a lot more, and they're appreciating a lot more that we do with nature as well, I think. So I think that's a big take for it as well. And they don't mind it at all. Like, they more just ask what we're doing on the weekend sometimes.
Yeah. I think it would also be different if we had full-time custody. So we have split custody with the children. So it might be different. I think we would have had to reconsider our design a little bit. But we do try and make sure that, we play like what we call like musical beds. You pick out a bed out of the hat and that's where you've got to sleep for the night. So maybe the kids are in the adult loft and we're in the kids loft, and sleeping in the lounge room or in a tent out in the yard. So, just to keep things fun and interesting.
Yeah, that sounds like fun. I love that. And, it sounds like a really beautiful way for them to live as well. You're talking about like spending more time outside and with the animals and kind of really being involved in, the different things that you guys are doing on the land. And I'm curious because you mentioned before, so you've got a rainwater tank and then composting toilet, and then you've got animals like chickens and stuff. Are you able to share a little bit more about what you guys have created there, like the self-sufficient setup that you have?
Yeah, so we started with a little veggie patch, a very small one that didn't perform all that well in the first year as we learned how to move through. But we were also going through a drought at the time, and we were being quite cautious with our water usage because we do recycle our grey water and use that for the veggie patch. So we've got a nice big garden now and a little orchard that we've got going, which has been great. So we were able to get quite a bit of our vegetables from that. A lot of our fresh greens and salad mixes come from our garden. And then we also got some honeybees, which has been a really fun experience as well to get honey, which the kids love. They adore honey, so that's great. They're get in there helping us, looking in the hive and harvesting the honey.
Some of our fruit comes through still because we've only got a small orchard at the moment because we've only been going for a couple of years. We do a little bit of meat around from different. So I've got some friends that have a bit more land and they have cattle that they'll do over a period of time as well. So we go around and help them out, and they'll repay us by giving us some meat as well. We also harvest some meat from some of our ducks as well.
Yeah,
do the best we can.
Do the best we can. But we have a really good community as well, so we do a lot of bartering, so trading of our honey and our eggs for other goods and stuff, or some of our vegetables as well. So the idea is eventually, hopefully, we would ideally like to be fully self-sufficient when we're able to have a property of our own, buying our own meat and vegetables and stuff like that. Just because we think if we're going to eat meat, ideally you want to make sure that the animals are living a good life and aren't being treated poorly, and and their death don't have to suffer too much.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess doing it yourself or doing it within a community that how the animals have, they've lived a happy, healthy life. That's going as close to the source as possible. And it sounds like it's really inspiring to see what you guys have created. And I love also that what you mentioned, Amy, about the bartering between community and between friends and stuff and family, because I feel like it's like going back to maybe how it used to be a long time ago, where we weren't relying so much on like these big corporations and supermarket chains and all of that, and just kind of taking it back to communal living. And whether it's someone or a family that's growing the veggies, and then others are doing the bees, and then making bread or whatever, or the meat or whatever it might be. And I think that's such a really rich way to kind of bring everything back to as close to the source as possible. And I really love that, and I would love to be able to create that for myself one day as well. And I'm wondering, so what does a day in the life of your family look like when you're living tiny?
Not much different from when we lived in our residential home. I think the biggest difference for us is just the fact that we have what we like to call as a tiny homestead. So getting up early and taking care of the animals and feeding them and giving them their fresh water. But otherwise, everything runs fairly similar. I think the biggest adjustment for us would be staggering the bathroom time, because we now have one bathroom between four of us when we're trying to get ready for work and school. But otherwise, outside of I vacuum every morning, we'll do the dishes every morning and stuff like that, just because more space, you've got to keep it clean more regularly. The day runs fairly similar. I work from home the majority of the time, so we'll do school drop off and then we're back home. Greg usually works from home most of the time as well. So usually you'll find us perched both on the lounge, either watching TV in the background or with our headphones while we work away on our laptops.
Doesn't really change much compared to what we used to do. Like I'll go to the gym first thing in the morning and then come home and start doing some things. And then, it's pretty much on with the work day.
Yeah, I'm in the garden in the morning usually.
But the harvesting. I think any time that it's changed has been on weekends. Like we get opportunities to go exploring a bit more, or we have, or we might have to do some meat harvesting or harvesting in the garden or something like that. So that obviously sometimes takes a bit of time. Like if you've got to harvest honey, that takes a bit of time.
Mm.
So yeah, it's just, that's probably the only change that's happened in the day in the life, really.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, it's like, it sounds like you kind of just make it your own, and it's just about transitioning into a smaller space, but you're sort of, still doing your day-to-day things. And then there are maybe some additional things like what you talked about, like on the weekends. Because I was just talking to another couple a few days ago for the podcast, and they were saying like, we live tiny, but we just feel like this is our life, and it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like something that's different or special or unique. It's just our life, but we choose to live it in a way that's like just in a smaller space and all of that. And so I could imagine that, maybe, does that sound like it's like a similar thing for you guys? This is just your life and this is just what you do.
Absolutely. It doesn't feel any different, I guess, in that sense.
Agree. While you said that, it reminded me of like the whole first year that we were living in the tiny. So that every time you'd see someone, they'd be like, still like living in the tiny?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, man, nothing wrong with it.
Nothing's different. It's just a small space.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess if someone hasn't experienced it before, it's like you never really know until you actually try it, even if you watch all the videos and all of that and see things online and stuff. So yeah, I can imagine that. And Amy, I've heard you say a few times as well, I think maybe on your social media, and I think you might have also said this for the compilation episode that you were a part of back in episode number 20 something. I'll put it in the show notes. But you said I've done so many at this point that sometimes I lose count. But you said you talked about making space for life rather than stuff, and I'd love if you're able to just go like deeper into that and like what that means for you.
I think when we look back at our life previously, we realized that we spend so much of our time working, and not all of us are lucky enough to be in jobs that we necessarily love and enjoy. And then, you spend your day at work, and then you come home and you clean your house and, cook your dinner and maybe help your kids with some homework. And then you go to bed and wake up and you do it all over again. And then your life is all of a sudden just on repeat. And when you sit back and look at it, quite often it's, I've got to get this promotion, or I need to get a bigger house, or buy an investment property, or get the new car. At least that was the case for me. Like, it was very career orientated, and the whole idea of living life was I live my life for 5 days a week at work, and I'm trying to progress my life. And then, one day of the weekend, I'll do all my chores. Like, I'll do the shopping for the groceries, we'll do our cleaning, we'll do our mowing of our little patch of grass. And then maybe on Sunday, we might do something. But now I'm so exhausted from my whole week of work and chores and doing all these other things, and I'm feeling unsatisfied because I haven't done anything that I love or enjoy. So maybe I just don't want to do anything. And I found that became the cycle of my life. A lot of that for us was driven by money. And so when we went tiny, naturally we reduced our bills. And so that allowed us freedom to choose what we wanted to do in regards to work. So you have that freedom to reduce your income if you want, or you can maintain that income, but because your bills are reduced, you now have an excess. Well, hopefully you have an excess of money. You're no longer applying this money that you had to large electricity bills or large rents. And so we could now choose to spend that elsewhere. And for us, that was in creating life. When we downsized, we had less to clean. So even though we clean daily, it literally, I've timed it. I usually put my coffee on, and while my coffee's running, I can vacuum the entire house. Like by the time my coffee's finished. So the cleaning is ridiculously small. I think maybe 10, 15 minutes a day and the house can look perfect. Whereas previously it would be, an hour of cleaning. So now you've gained 45 minutes at least a day to be able to spend that time with the kids, now I have that time to go out in the park and we can kick the ball around, or, I have time now to go to the gym and see my girlfriends for a coffee because I don't have to do that at home. And then we also got that financial freedom to be able to travel. That for us was where we got to create life and actually live. So we may have lost a lot of materialistic items, but we've gained so much more, and we've got a far better relationship with our children. Since we've gone tiny, we've been able to put the kids into, after school activities, which we just couldn't do previously. They can be quite expensive, and
we just never had time.
yeah,
Like, it's amazing how much time we seem to have now. Like it's not as if we have intentionally gone and done things to make sure we have more time throughout our day. We've just we downsized things that, like you said, you've just made these little bits throughout the day, and suddenly it's like, well, I've got 5 minutes here, I've got 5 minutes there, and that just compounds up so that eventually you've got time to do the things you wanted to do. So now instead of collecting stuff, we're collecting experiences, and it's so much more often compared to what we used to do.
mm-hmm.
Like Amy said before, we'd get to Sunday and we'd just be so tired, like because we'd worked all week, and now we've worked all week, and that's fine. We've still got stuff to do around the yard, but it's like we really enjoy about what goes on around the house, and we can get out on the weekend and actually have energy to do stuff. That space is there with time, with financial freedom, with everything. Just it really did create space in every way for us.
We also were so disconnected from the children. When we lived in our previous house, the master bedroom was at the front of the house, and the kids was at the far, rear opposite side of the house. So when the kids were in their bedrooms, you didn't see them. You'd see them for meals, and then that was it. You might watch a show together on the TV, but with so many devices and stuff now, that wasn't really a thing. They just go watch their own devices. But now, in a shared space, even if they're trying to ignore us, we can still hear them, they can still hear us, and quite often, like Greg and I will be having a conversation, and they'll pipe in and chat with us. So it's nice to know, that they're still part of our lives, even if they are in our bedrooms.
We have a family full of jokers, so they tend to jump in and tell jokes quite a bit.
You guys had so many great things there, and I love how before you said, Greg, about collecting experiences now, and it seems to be like when the focus is not on all this material stuff, when we let go of all these things and we downsize, and that it is really coming back to those experiences and spending time with those that you love, and really remembering like what it is that is most important, and it's not that material stuff, and yeah, I just love everything that you guys shared there, and it's so beautiful to just hear how it is, I guess, for your family, and you're talking about how like it's brought you guys closer together. And I think one of the question marks I hear quite often in the tiny house spaces when people have families, when they've got small kids, is like, can I really do this, and can I really make it work? And it's a really small space and all of that. What would you say to someone that maybe is like on the fence of like, well, I don't know if I could make it work with my kids? I mean, obviously every family is different, every child or children are different, and every context and situation are different, but just if someone's kind of like, I don't know if I could make it work, is there anything that you could, maybe advice or anything you like to share about that, just maybe to help or inspire someone?
I'd probably try it out first. So like being the situation that we're in now, it's probably a bit easier as well, as in like there's a few like Airbnb tiny houses around. I'd probably rent a caravan for a week, go try and live in the caravan for a week with your kids. If you're struggling to make it work in there, then you might need some further adjustment period. Because for us, we did a fair bit of downsizing and communicating leading up to the tiny house to make sure that we were ready for it. It's not like we went from like a 4-bedroom house to this tiny house with 2 lofts. All of a sudden, it was like we had that space there, and then what we did is we essentially mapped out the space that we would be using inside our house and the sort of things that we use within our house, and we communicated all this with our kids and said, look, this is the space that we're trying to use, and this is how we're trying to transition, and like that's how we went about it.
I think that's probably the best point, is to make sure that you include the children in the discussion, and it's also on how you talk about it. If you say, oh, we're going to be in a tiny place and we're probably going to get on each other's nerves, and you're very negative about it, children look up to their parents and take on those opinions as their own. So if you're optimistic and you're positive about it, then that's how the kids will view it as well. And if you make them part of the decisions, then they're going to be excited about it as well. Like we talked to them about their loft and their ladder, and I mean, they were ecstatic to have a ladder. It's like being in a permanent bunk bed. So, the simple things for kids, make it exciting. And if they do have concerns, chat to them about it. Their concerns are just as valid as yours. And then I think the other thing is you've got to be flexible. Children's needs change probably quicker than, you do as an adult. Your personality is fairly set in stone, I think. Obviously, we do change and grow as well, but not as fast as children. And as they go through all their different leaps and, phases in life, I think that's, something to look at. But with a tiny house, if it's your own, that's the beauty of it, right? You can transition and you can change it and adjust the space as needed.
I love that. Really, really great advice. So try it out first, get the kids involved, and then be flexible with, their needs as they're growing and as they're evolving. I think that's really great. And now for a quick break from this tiny house conversation. So I want to let you know about something that's especially exciting for curious tiny houses. It's a 3D tiny house designer that my friends at Tiny Easy have recently released. Since you're listening to this podcast to learn more about tiny living, you've probably been envisioning and dreaming about what your own tiny house could look like. Well, Tiny Easy's 3D Tiny House Designer is the first online design tool that lets you design your tiny house without needing any technical or design knowledge. I know for someone like me whose creative strengths are definitely not in design, that this is a time and frustration saver. I've had a play around in the designer and I love that I can just drag and drop building blocks to design my tiny house in minutes and then share the design with my friends and tiny house builders. How cool is that? So what's the alternative? Well, I'd literally be sitting here for weeks or months trying to learn a difficult professional drafting program, or I'd have to hire an expensive architect. All the technical stuff kind of hurts my brain. Can you relate? And I'd rather the money go towards some must-have features in my tiny house. Now, I'd already designed my own tiny home before this designer was available. But if and when I decide on my next tiny project, I know what I'll be using to design it. The best thing about the 3D Tiny House Designer is that you can try it out for free and start mocking up your tiny house today. Just choose one of their beautiful tiny house design templates or start from scratch and let your creativity and imagination run free. And if you like the 3D Tiny House Designer, the Tiny Easy team is giving you a super generous 75% off the first month of the premium version that includes a ton of more awesome objects, furniture, decorations, materials, and more to make your tiny house super special. So just head over to tinyhouseconversations.com/Tiny Easy Designer. And use the code Lucy75, that's Lucy in all caps, 75, the numbers, to get started. I'll also put a link in the show notes for your easy access. Now back to the show. Even though it sounds like it's working out for you guys super well and you're really loving living tiny, I guess, the reality is you're still living life. And I'm just curious, are there any or what are some of maybe the main challenges you've experienced just while living in a tiny home?
I think maybe the initial challenge would be pre-tiny. So when we were downsizing. So for me, not an issue. I have moved my whole life. I don't hold on to stuff. I don't have an attachment to stuff. But for Greg, it was a completely different story.
I come from a family of hoarders. So I had a very steep learning curve onto how just to let go of things a little bit easier, I think. Now, I wasn't necessarily what you'd call a hoarder myself, but I honestly did have a lot of trouble letting go of some really basic things, even like some clothes and things like that. But I always held on to things thinking that someone might notice if I don't keep a hold of that gift that they gave me or something like that. And it was an outrageous thought at the time. Honestly, looking back on it, I'm like, I can't believe I used to think that. I was having sweats over this stuff. It was insane how bad I struggled with it. So that was a part of, like we said before, how we had to run a dry run in our full size house. And what we did is we had, that spare room that everyone seems to have that they just ignore.
Yeah.
We, we had one of those, and what we did is we took a bunch of the stuff that, mainly that I had to let go of, and we put it all in there, essentially closed the door, locked the key, and said, well, let's see how we go without it for a month. And my life didn't change at all. I was like, well, I never used it, so let's get rid of it.
Made the process a bit easier.
It made it a lot easier. That was probably my biggest challenge. Over time, like it's not even a thought anymore. I think I still definitely hold on to things more than Amy does. Amy is very insanely good at letting go of things. She's always been a bit of a minimalist.
Yeah.
When it comes to me, I like things.
Yeah.
I suppose you'd call them trinkets and treasures and things like that. I think the other thing would be, when we did move into the tiny house, I think our original lifestyle was fine. And when we moved in, I think COVID hit not long after. Yeah, 6 months after we moved in. So that brought on like working from home and a whole array of different challenges that we had. And the main challenge that we had was to learn to actually work in the same space together, because we were very different people at work compared to what we were at home.
Yeah.
And there was some learning.
Yeah, and I think also at the time Greg used to work split shift at the gym, so he'd get his alone time in the middle of the day, and I was working at an office at the time, and so I would get my alone time in the morning when Greg was at work, and then all of a sudden you're in a tiny space and you have no alone time, and you're sitting literally next to each other on the couch. And I run my day a certain way and he runs his day a certain way, and he's trying to have his midday naps and I'm talking on the phone for work. I think that was a bit of an adjustment, but we had a lot of conversations, I think, about like our needs and stuff like that. And our lifestyles naturally kind of transitioned now, where we've kind of almost in the same routines, like still a bit different with Greg's shifts and everything, but that was probably the hardest for me, was adjusting to Greg being home and then not being available for me all the time. So I'd be like, I want to talk about something. Like, why are you not available right now? You're at home.
Yeah, I think it brought through like a new level for our relationship as well with that. Like it brought open a space for us to be learning a bit more about communication for ourselves and to be open with how we are feeling at that time, instead of like letting it sort of fester inside until it sort of boiled out. And it took a while for us to get to be able to talk about it as the topics were coming up. But now I think, we're pretty good. Like I think we know each other's work routines now. Like I know when Amy's got a day full of phone calls, and Amy checks in when my call schedules are going on, or if I have to record videos and things like that. So yeah, I think it just blends a bit nicer now.
Yeah.
I think that was probably our biggest challenge. I don't think there's anything else other really than that.
No. There was a few like setup challenges which were not huge, more comical. But there was times like when we first got the tiny house, they just left our tiny house on the driveway because they were running late for another job.
Oh my goodness.
And Greg was at work. I'm trying to call a tow company because we had nowhere to go. Like we were out of the house. I was stuck within the paddock under a tarp.
Yeah, we were waiting.
We were waiting on our house. And trying to get somebody to come and move the house in. And then they did move the house in, and Greg again, like we got in late, and Greg had to work the next morning. And then we didn't realize that with our front door, if you lock it with the key from the outside, you can't unlock it from the inside. And so Greg had gone to work at like 3 a.m, locked the door, and then I got stuck in the tiny house. I couldn't get out. So I'm like climbing up the bifold window, but the house, like the bifold window is like, we didn't have a deck. So we were like 1.2 meters from the ground, like dangling from this window to try and open the door. And then there was another time I got locked out because the door accidentally somehow slammed shut. It was raining, and I was trying to grab stuff out of the paddock and just like throw it into the house. And the door somehow locked itself. The stupid sliding door. Every time, and only to me. And I was locked out the house in the rain while Greg was at work. I had no phone to call him.
Oh my goodness. First you're locked in and then you're locked out.
All within a week.
Oh my, Tiny house stories. I could imagine there would be, so many people would have so many funny and interesting stories about tiny life. And I mean, I loved everything you guys shared there as well. And I think, Greg, you said before about the relationship and the communication. And I find that super interesting, especially just from talking to different couples, because it almost seems like it's this unintentional benefit that comes along with living in a small space and then having to adapt, maybe if you're both working from home, especially with what's happened in the last couple of years, and forcing everyone to kind of pivot and bring things back into the home and not go to a workplace in some cases and all of that. And so yeah, I find that super interesting, because I guess in a small space, it's like there's nowhere to hide, really, is there? Like unless you want to go out for a walk or something or sit out on the deck, but that it does force you into this resolving of things that might come up and not tucking it away and dealing with it later, or not dealing with it at all, and then maybe it comes out in a bigger way down the track, whatever it might be. So I find that super interesting, of like navigating that relationship dynamics and that open communication.
Yeah, it's definitely like you said, one of those extra benefits that you just didn't expect.
Very grateful for it, though.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned like you might go for a walk or something like that. We actually take walks together during the day, because otherwise we're sitting.
Yeah, and that's been doing a lot of our talking, debriefing.
Yeah, we sort of debrief on our walk up and down the drive. Our driveway is about, from to the end and back again is about 400 meters. Yeah, we do a couple of laps every now and then throughout the day, so we get a bit of time to debrief from work and B, catch up with each other.
Oh, that's nice. That's really nice. And I'm curious, so what brings you guys the most joy about tiny house living?
It's a bit of a loaded question, isn't it?
I know.
Honestly,
there's probably so many things.
There's so many things. I find that I do a gratitude journal every morning, and so often it's just the tiny house that I'm grateful for. The fact that I don't think we would be in a position where we'd be able to afford our own home, especially now. And the fact that we have that stability, especially when so many other people may not have that. It's the stability that we have, knowing that we've got a home, that it's ours, that someone doesn't have to come in and look at it every 3 months, like when we were renting, and that it's our safe space, it's our happy place. And then, yeah, that's it, it's ours, and that it offers us so much freedom.
Mine's on a similar tone to that, I think. For me, it's about like the opportunity that it brings, and that I'm in love with the stuff we get to do with nature by being here. The farm life is me at heart.
Yeah.
Like I can't wait until we get on a bigger lot. I'm already sitting there. I'm already trying to plan out our paddocks and everything. And trying to stop Aang from buying different animals.
If I could, I would have a cow already.
That's where my heart is. So being in here actually opens up so many opportunities for us because of that. It's close to my heart because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd imagine as well, like having your own, being able to afford your own land in the first place is helped out by being able to live in your tiny house, because you are reducing those costs of living. So then you can kind of put it towards a space of your own. And it's just really lovely to, like, that whole sentiment is just, yeah, I love that. And I'm also wondering, because I'm sure you guys have heard different things that people might say online or just ask you about, or just having different conversations over the time that you've been living tiny. Is there a misconception or multiple misconceptions that you've had yourself, or that you hear people commonly talk about, misconceptions about living in a tiny house?
I think it might just be the fact that so many people think it's not a doable lifestyle, or that we are sacrificing so much to be tiny, or that we've been forced into this position and that's not a choice. But like every week, I swear, I get people who say, do you still like your tiny? Are you still living in your tiny? And for us, this is a long-term option. If I didn't ever have to leave, I'd be happy. I love it. It's not a sacrifice for us.
This is home.
Yeah, it's a home.
Yeah, it's home for us. I get the same thing. A lot of people think that it's a tiny space, but like when you walk into the tiny house, it's like almost like all of our friends that come over, they walk in, they go, wow.
So much bigger.
So much space in here.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's right. Like it's home. Like this isn't just, we're not just living in like a small caravan to make ends meet. Like this was a lifestyle choice for us because we actually enjoy it.
I think that's what so many people don't realize is with tiny houses, I think people just assume because, especially if they're on like wheels, oh, they must just be a caravan, or why don't you just have a caravan? But with a tiny house, especially now, like you've got so many options, they can be so big. You have the option to live still a full-sized life in a tiny space. You know, we haven't sacrificed on anything except maybe a dishwasher. That was about the only thing. Kids were quite upset about that. But yeah.
Kids are for.
I love that. Well, and you said it a couple of times there, Amy, so it's not a sacrifice, right? And I feel like I hear that a lot, that people that are, well, I guess whether they're looking at tiny living for themselves or they're just kind of looking at the whole movement and what's happening from the outside in, that it does seem to be a perception in some circles of you would have to sacrifice so many things. You know, you would have to sacrifice the way that you live your life or material possessions, and maybe to, I don't know, but I feel like it's maybe sacrifice is like not the right word to use, but that you can really just still have your comforts and you can still do things that you love, and maybe it's just like these little adjustments that you make in your day, or you know, how you live your life, but that it's overall, it's not a sacrifice. It's just a different way of living and being.
Just being intentional with what you choose to do in your life, I think, or what you want to do in your life.
That's it, intentional.
Yeah, it's a life of being
everything with a purpose.
Yeah, 100% intentional, living intentionally. I love that. As we start to wrap up the conversation today, guys, I'm wondering, because I know you've got your Instagram page and you were, you know, sharing your journey, and I know you were doing a bit of YouTube and stuff like that before, but is there anything that you're working on, your Life Done Simple on those platforms? Are there any other projects that you're working on, or is there anything that you're doing more with that space?
I think there's always intention to do more, but I get caught up in living life and forget to share it. So for now, Instagram sharing as we do when we do, I think is probably it. We are actually looking at doing a shed build, which will be a little cedar shed that we're going to convert into a home office, and then another teenage retreat so that the kids can, you know, go in there if they do want more space, because we are aware that they are becoming teenagers, and, you know, teenagers tend to not enjoy being with their parents all the time. So we probably will document that quite heavily on YouTube, I think.
Yeah, and like while we get stuff down for YouTube, but we sort of I think the problem that we have, like you said, is we get caught up in just living sometimes, so we forget to finish the job or something along the lines like that. So it's one of those things that sort of sits us up. We're working on it, but we're just being a little intentional with life at the moment. So hang with us, guys. We'll have some stuff for you soon, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think that's such a beautiful way to live. You're just present in your everyday life and not having to share about it all the time, which I think is, you know, I feel like once I move into my tiny home, I'm probably going to be like that quite a lot. Like, yeah, I want to share the journey, but I guess it comes back to, you know, wanting to be really intentional and present and just be there in your everyday life and, you know, not miss all those small moments and all of that. Do you want to let everyone know, I just mentioned the name before, but do you want to let everyone know, like, maybe where's the best place that they can come and connect with you online if they either just want to see your journey? I know you were talking about sharing some stuff on YouTube, but if you want to just, let them know the handle or the address, the website, or
Honestly, the best place for us will always be Instagram, I think. We do have a little link which does take them to our blog, which I've been very slack with, and our YouTube, but the handle is life_done_simple. And that's where we share most frequently and contacted most frequently too.
Yeah, and if there's anything new that's going to come onto any of the other platforms, it'll probably be announced on Instagram first.
Okay, great. I will put a link in the show notes of your handle at tinyhouseconversations.com. So Amy and Greg, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. It's been so great to just chat with you guys, get to know a little bit more about your story. And I really love what you're creating, you know, in your tiny house life with your family. And it's been really inspiring to watch. And yeah, I just really appreciate you being here and for sharing today. So thanks again.
No, thank you for having us and for sharing our story with your audience.
If you're listening to us at home, make sure you go check out Life Done Simple on Instagram. Again, I'll put the link at tinyhouseconversations.com. And thank you so much for being here with us today. As always, make sure you stay tuned every Thursday for new episodes of Tiny House Conversations. And I'll see you next week. Thanks again for listening. And if you enjoyed the conversation today, you found it valuable and you want to support the podcast, the best way you can do that is to share the love. That way I can keep bringing you more tiny house conversations to help you on your own tiny journey. So here are 3 ways that you can support the podcast. Number 1, if you have a friend or family member that you feel would benefit from hearing these conversations, feel free to share it with them, email them, text them, send them a telegram, do whatever you need to do to share it with them. Number 2, if you hit the subscribe button, you'll know exactly when the next episode is live. And number 3, if you head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to podcasts and leave a 5-star rating and review. Thank you so much in advance. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next episode.